Robert Jones, welcome to the Author's Voice.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
The book is called Reinventing Mike Lake, a very interesting, introspective book about a guy who loses his wife and then goes around the country to North Carolina, Key West, rediscovering himself, meeting up with relatives. And I was thinking before we were going to do this interview, what would lead someone to write a book about losing his wife, knowing that you still have your lovely wife, Jessica? So what led you to write this?
I believe the reason I was looking for something that I thought would be emotional both for the writer and for the reader, because I believe if I thought it was emotional while I was writing it, I would get a lot out of it, feel passionate about writing it, and oddly enough, not oddly enough, but of course that was the worst thing I could think of happening. So I guess that's why I went with it. But yes, my wife is perfectly healthy, ready to give birth to our first child any second now. So she's
Wow,
ready to go.
awesome. And
Yep.
so Mike Lake, lose wife, he's a freelance journalist, much like yourself.
Yeah.
And why does he decide to go on the road?
Well, he sat in his house for about a year mourning. He didn't really do anything. He lived close to his parents and they took care of him, and he really just wanted to jumpstart his life again. And he thought the best way to do that was to change things up a little bit for himself. So one day he hopped in the car with his dog Bahama right after taking a walk, and off he went with no particular plan or anything.
But he ended up at relatives' house in North Carolina and in Florida. Why did he go to family homes?
Well, I think, yes, he ends up at his sister's house in North Carolina first. He had had a rift with his sister regarding the person she married, and in the back of his mind, it always bothered him. And of course, while he was mourning, he wasn't there for his sister at all. So maybe subconsciously or unconsciously, he wanted to see her again and make things right with her. And you know, he says he doesn't know where he's going, but maybe in his mind he always wanted to make up with her because they were close growing up. She was older than him, but she always treated him fairly and kindly and everything. So he always felt bad that he wasn't there for her during her time of need.
So the book is listed as fiction, but really, besides your wife still being alive, how much of it does this mirror your life?
I recently had a friend who I hadn't talked to since about college catch up with me, and one of the things I told him is if he wanted to see what I've been up to since college, more or less, read my book. Of course, he knew Jessica was healthy too, so um, a large amount of it is of course real. I might have took the what write what you know a little too literally, if you will, but it was fun to write it because I got to go back and relive some of my memories, and
Mm.
Mike Lake didn't necessarily feel the same way about the places he went that I did. So for example, Mike Lake wasn't a huge fan of Las Vegas. I lived there for 18 months. I loved it. Like things like that. So, I tried to change some of the views between what I really think and what Mike Lake thought. But, yeah, I mean, a lot of it is very true and, true. Yeah, true to me.
So you write about sports as a freelance writer, which are factual things. How is it going to being more of a creative writer and writing sort of a fiction?
It was a hard transition at first. One of the hardest reasons I thought it was because unfortunately when you're getting paid to be a writer, and I was getting up writing every day and like knowing, and the other thing, most of the time you had a deadline with a word count. So I was writing things that were about, 1,000 pages, or, I mean, I'm sorry, 1,000 words. That was a lot of my word count, 1,000 words. So I would see, I would just look at my word count at the end of the day, and it would be about 1,000 words. And, that always made me laugh. But I eventually grew out of that and learned to write longer or write less if that's what I needed, particularly that day. Not necessarily, I have to hit my 1,000 word count. And where my editor was my cousin, who's an English teacher, high school English teacher, and she told me she could tell that I was wordy in the sense that, like I was trying to fill words to do a book report. But as I went on, it got better. So she even saw that, I was able to grow out of that mold, so to speak, as I continued writing.
And your writing has changed, as you mentioned, or you got out of that mold. What about you as a person? When you went back and revisited those things and your thoughts, those places, those people, what have you learned about yourself through this process?
That's a very good question. I learned that well, I learned that I like to write about places I like to vacation, first of all. What was funny, though, is writing about the Keys, Key West particularly. I had only been in Key West for a couple hours. We went during our honeymoon. Like, it would have been about 4 years prior to that. So, I did some research, of course, but I trying to remember, and what I remembered is that a lot of those things stuck with me, to answer your question. And my mind automatically went to those things, sort of like Mike Lake didn't, he said he didn't know where he was going, but maybe in his head he knew the whole time. Like,
Mm.
my mind went to places that I felt comfortable about writing, and places I knew I liked, for the most part.
Did you take any chances? Did you do anything differently than in your own life? In other words, did you allow the character of Mike Lake to be maybe a little bit more adventurous or less adventurous than you? Did you make some shifts in his character?
I think for Mike Lake's character, he even mentions this. His whole life, he had always been taking care of a woman, being taken care of by a woman, whether it was his mother or his wife, who he met right when he started college. I believe I said it was his first day of college. He met her at the bookstore. And even when he got to Key West, even in North Carolina, his sister was there. And in Key West, his the person who owned the bed and breakfast took care of him. Gene took a liking to him. So when he left Key West to go across country, in his mind he said, a woman's always been taking care of me. I should try to, I want to explore the world on my own. But he ends up going to Las Vegas and meeting a girl there anyway. But and maybe that was his fate, but he had the idea, he was aware of that he wanted to change things about that. Yes.
Now, the end, we don't want to give much of it away. You mentioned that he did meet someone. But did you know what the end was going to be when you started writing this, or did it sort of evolve as you were writing?
I One of the, I mean, there's been a few complaints with the book, and reviews, but one of the biggest ones has been the ending, and that people thought it ended too abruptly. I wanted to keep it open-ended for him. In a way, I feel like you learned a lot about him along the way. So it was almost up to you to decide, what he really did at the end. Again, I'm not trying to use too much, just like you said. Did I know where it was going? Not really. As I was very lucky to know that, as I was finishing up one chapter or one, I'd almost call it a scene, between North Carolina, the Keys, that as I was, I wrote it in order pretty much. And as it was going, I'm going to write about this next. So in that case, I was pretty lucky.
Are you working on another book?
Well, with my wife is due at the end of the month, but we just found out she's probably we're having a daughter. She's probably gonna come a little earlier. So I've been pretty busy trying to get things ready
I'm
for
sure.
that. Yeah, I started, believe it or not, I started a sequel for Reinventing Mike Lake, and fans of the book might not want to hear this, but I sort of scrapped it because I wasn't exactly happy where it was going, but I would love to go back and entertain that idea. And I also would like to write about um, maybe some of my experiences being a father. That might
Uh,
be something else to look for from me.
Looking forward to that. Robert,
Oh,
or
thank you.
Bobby, as some people call you, or RW.
Yeah.
The book is called Reinventing Mike Lake. Thank you so much for being on The Author's Voice.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.